Hey there guys, what's going on? So as the span of this musical week of ours continues, you will see the logjam of the many album reviews I've been scheming out finally burst forth in some type of metaphorical flowery emission, aka what I should have been doing all along if I really wanted to get people to tune in here, but that's all up to your subjective opinion, I suppose. Anyway, I've got a lot of stuff on tap that I want to work through this week for all of you guys to see. And for this little episode, we're going to cover an album whose release is just slightly prior to this point, on the 13th of this month, from a band whose career trajectory has not only been a subject of some of the best videos I ever did on my old channel, but also has me slightly perplexed on their new direction. But we'll get to that in a moment. Today we're going to be talking about the Black Keys, the Akron-based blues outfit coming off of one of their strongest commercial successes to date with 2011's El Camino. The record continued to represent a slowly graduating shift away from the sound that initially defined them on their debut The Big Come Up, and followers like Magic Potion and Rubber Factory, but was probably one of their most popular to this point. And now they followed up with a new and very psychedelic looking one called Turn Blue. So that's what we're going to be covering here today, and I will say in advance that I'm going to be giving this my most straight-lined, objective, right down the heart of the plate, fairly balanced review. Not that I wouldn't anyway, but I know this record has kind of had shots fired from both sides, with irritated fans on one end who claim hipster journalists are doing nothing but knocking the band, and others who just, well, frankly, aren't into the sound that the Keys are producing right now. As for me, I'm not so influenced, and I'm as far into the middle as can be. So, let's get to it, shall we? This is coverage of the Black Keys with their new record, Turn Blue. When I observed the evolution of the Black Keys from their earliest origins in 2002 up until this present day we're here to discuss right now, I inevitably come to the conclusion of the same positives and negatives that exist within this band. Turn Blue still manages to speak differently from the likes of El Camino and Brothers, for instance, but for as much as it does differentiate, this record still falls within the same set of rough ground rules. On the positive side, songs like Weight of Love and In Our Prime shows that the Keys haven't forgotten their early blues roots or their occasional tendency to twist things up a little bit, even if the phrasing is much more cleaned up and moved from the garage to the shinier studio with all those fancy knobs and buttons these days. And for as much issue as I have when it comes to the substance of Dan Auerbach's lyrics, which I'll get to in just a moment, he remains a succinctly effective pop songwriter that can write a catchy hook as well as most in the current musical landscape, which, given the band's heavily commercial aspect, is a pretty fitting traveling companion. That being said, there's an old adage that simply goes, less is more, and Turn Blue suffers from a case of consistent overcrowding. While I've often been able to appreciate the heavier inclusion of other instrumentation that isn't just gritty guitars and drum pulses over the last few years, there's something to be said for not being quite so overtly glittery all the time as well. The continued collaborating with producer Brian Burton, aka Danger Mouse, is certainly a factor in this, and one wonders just how much more of a path there is left to explore between he and the band before it truly devolves into little more than repeated, exercised, canned repetition. And while there's a decidedly psychedelic and soul-heavy feel to this effort that changes the dynamic as well, the tracks all feel too muddled to be poignant or decisive enough to really make it a lasting impact. Auerbach wrote a great deal of the lyrics to Turn Blue during the painfully messy breakup of his marriage, but rather than act as an exorcism or fuel to burn those feelings in their strongest way, it feels more like a self-serving skate across a shallow pond. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not going to pretend to know and psychologically evaluate the intimate details of another man's painful life obstacles, but across the span of classic breakup records, I've seen more soulful creativity spouted in 5 minutes than in the entire 45-minute span of this caricature masquerading as an attempt at confessional hand-wringing. For a man who once wrote a song like Rubber Factory's deeply, utterly aching the lengths, Turn Blue sounds more like a cast of emotional throwaways that dodge real pain so that next girl can be the one for Auerbach's breaking, aching, howling gaze of fevered, empty storytelling. That being said, for what it is, Turn Blue does feature a nice, if not altogether striking set of memorable songs. While I still consider it a surprising choice for a single, Fever has a strong pop feel with a decent psychedelic groove. Bullet in the Brain possesses a kind of cinematic Tarantino trapped in the peyote-laced Old West vibe, and Gotta Get Away has a catchy, chorus-oriented joy in its getting the hell away from the claws of a bad situation. It's an album that's redeeming in stretches, but unfortunately, not in total miles. My favorites from this one are the aforementioned Fever, Weight of Love, In Our Prime, and the falsetto-heavy swoon of Waiting on Words. For all my criticism into Dan Auerbach's lyricisms and a much too glossy production style, the Black Keys are still an effective band even in a realm they've greatly altered for themselves. Auerbach still is one of the most soulfully versatile croons in the business, and these songs are going to do very well in the overall scheme of what they are. Is it going to lure old fans back into the fold? Not by a long shot. But I think somewhere in the greater scheme of things, there's hope for these guys yet. However, for now, I have to give Turn Blue a 6.5 out of 10. But that's it, and that's all for me here, guys, with my review of the Black Keys and their new album, Turn Blue. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Throw fruit at my head if you didn't, because I'm certainly aware that there will be those of you who do not like this. And make sure to like and subscribe to my channel, or whatever favorable thing you can. Follow along for plenty more content. Click the ads to support this fool right here, and just keep it here because there's going to be a lot more cool stuff soon to come. And, you know, taking the world by storm here in 2014, guys, so keep it here.